Hello, future scientists. Let's talk about the different fields that you could join in the life sciences. So many different career choices out there, and we're going to go over most of them today. All right, I'm Ms. Newton, fields in the life sciences. Let's go. So the first one I have listed here is botany, which means you would be studying plants. Zoology, you would be studying animals. Now, if you go into that field, you would be considered a zoologist. You may also go on to veterinary school and become a veterinarian. Marine biology, they study organisms living in oceans, and that would be a marine biologist. Freshwater biology is someone who studies organisms living in and around freshwater lakes, streams, rivers, and ponds. An example of this would be the mass migration of salmon every 4 years, where they swim upstream a river, they lay eggs, and then they die. It's a really interesting phenomenon. And then the eggs go on to hatch, and then those salmon will continue that, cycle of life. So a freshwater biologist may be involved in studying that. All right, microbiology. This is where you would be studying microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, yeasts, and parasites, little bugs. And microbiologists would either just study these things or possibly they'd be involved in developing new medications for these things. Same with a bacteriology or a bacteriologist. They are specifically studying bacteria and so possibly antibiotics to fight off that bacteria. A virologist would study viruses. An entomologist would study insects. Here's the friendly little, I don't know if that's a praying mantis or a grasshopper. I actually have no idea. No idea. All right. A cell biologist would be studying cells and their structures and functions. And this just seems like a nonstop avenue of discovery as we go along. Whether it's animal cells or plant cells, there is so much to study and learn about cells. And a cell biologist would likely just be publishing their research. They wouldn't quite be doing any kind of applied fields where like they're a doctor or anything like that. They would most likely be involved in research or education. Anatomy studies the structure of animals, including the human body. Morphology studies the form and structure of living organisms. And physiology studies the physical and chemical functions of tissues and organs. So that would be a physiologist. That includes fields such as exercise physiology, where an exercise physiologist may work in a lab where they study the science of exercise basically, or they might work in a field where they're working with patients one-on-one. Well, an immunologist is someone who studies mechanisms inside organisms that protect them from disease and infection. A neuroscientist studies the nervous system. There are also neurologists, so doctors who work with patients to apply all of the information that has come from neuroscience. Developmental biology and embryology. This is the growth and development of plants and animals. We're not done. Genetics. They study the genetic makeup of living organisms and heredity. A person who studies genetics is called a geneticist. And this might be someone that you would go see. They sometimes work with maybe clients to help them understand any risk factors they have in the family of passing on a genetic disease to their offspring. So if somebody knows that there's a genetic disorder that has popped up here and there in their lineage, they may go see a geneticist to find out what is their percent chance that their offspring is going to have that genetic disorder. I find it a very fascinating field, actually. A biochemist would work with chemistry of living organisms. A molecular biologist works with nucleic acids and proteins. So this would be like DNA RNA, that kind of thing. An epidemiologist would study how diseases arise and spread. So not the disease itself. In other words, they're not studying the actual microorganism, although they would use information from that field. But what they hope to achieve is understanding exactly how it is spread. Is it spread just by touch or droplets or just air transmission? And how to stop the spread and maybe where the spread is occurring, where it's likely to not occur in the world, that sort of thing. Evolution. This is the changing of species over time. Ecology. They study how various organisms interact with their environment. A biogeographist, or I should say, I don't know if that's an actual word, biogeography. This is the study of the distribution of living organisms, meaning where are they located? How do they move? So they might study something like here in Florida, we have the iguanas. They're very, big lizards. And they are not indigenous to Florida. They came over, from what I've heard, they came over to Florida on fruit crates from South America. Now, why have they populated Florida? Because we have a similar climate and it's ideal for them. The problem is, why is it a problem? Well, because they tend to affect the ecosystem in Florida in a way that is not intended. So they'll eat certain foliage that we need to keep around, stuff like that. I personally really love the iguanas. Whenever I see one, I love it. I see them in my backyard all the time. I ain't got a problem with them. All right, population biology. This is the biodiversity, evolution, and environmental biology of populations of organisms. And that is it. Okay, so let's kind of look at the two, I guess, overall groups of scientists. All right, so there is basic science. This is, if somebody works in basic science, they're working to understand how things work. So they might be directly studying cells and just understanding how they work and publishing that research for, maybe pharmaceutical companies to use or medical doctors to use. They also might study ecosystems, all right? These scientists increase human knowledge with their research. So examples of these would be cell biologists, botanists, microbiologists, exercise physiologists, and ecologists. Scientific theories have come from basic science research. So a scientific theory is a well-substantiated explanation of the natural world that is based on the scientific method, hypotheses, and facts. Now, how is that different from a scientific law? A scientific law is a statement based on repeated experiments that describe a range of natural phenomenon. So repeated experiments, in other words, they have literally found this to be a law, such as gravity. What goes up will come down, unless it's a feather and it like flies away in the wind, but it's eventually going to come down, right? So that's how gravity works. That's a law. It's not a theory. A theory is a little bit less tested. Okay, applied science. This is someone who is using knowledge, or someone who works in applied science is using knowledge from basic science to solve practical problems. So they're actually working to do something. And it's not that basic scientists aren't doing something. They're coming up with all of the information that the applied scientists use to do their jobs. So these scientists may be developing and placing windmills or seeing patients as a medical professional. So here's the first example. A basic scientist may study how the body makes cholesterol, but an applied scientist may prescribe a diet or medication to lower a patient's cholesterol. So they have an applied scientist looks at all the research and says, okay, this is what you need to do. Example 2, a basic scientist may study wind and weather patterns, but an applied scientist may develop or place windmills based on the wind patterns. So they're actually using the basic science of wind and applying it to establishing windmills and things like that. That is it. I hope you enjoyed that lecture, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.